Welcome to episode 34 of the LorainCounty.com Business Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Skimmon, and today we're talking with Dan Petticord, candidate for judge of the Lorain County Court of Common Pleas. Join us as Dan shares his motivations for running, his extensive legal career, and the guiding principles that will shape his approach to the bench. He also discusses the role of technology in courtrooms, his proudest career achievements, and his dedication to upholding law with integrity. This episode is part of the 2024 Candidate Spotlight Series, aimed at providing an additional way to learn about local leaders running for office. Before we get started, I wanted to share a quick disclaimer. Both of the companies I co-founded, Emerge Inc. and LorainCounty.com, have professional relationships with some of the candidates, and I also count a few of them as personal friends. To ensure fairness, we invited all local candidates to participate and record an episode completely free of charge. Each candidate running for the same office was asked the exact same questions, and aside from removing any unnecessary sounds and long pauses, we kept the editing to a minimum. For a full list of local candidates and issues, visit loraincounty.com/election. And on election night, visit loraincounty.com for real-time election results. Here is my conversation with Dan Petticord.
Dan Petticord, I'm a candidate for Common Pleas Judge in Lorain County, the seat currently held by Jim Maraldi. He's retiring at the end of this year.
Welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining us and sharing your insights. To start with, what motivated you to run for judge?
Well, it's a long answer. Lawyers always give long answers, so I'll give you a long answer. When I was a very young lawyer working in Cleveland, there was a judge named Burt Griffin, and I tried 3 cases in a row in front of Judge Griffin because I was working for a company called Corporation, and one of their senior executives got in a car accident and decided it wasn't his fault. And 3 juries very quickly agreed that it was. So I got my butt kicked 3 times in front of Burt Griffin, but I got to know him at that time. And he instilled in me the idea that as a professional, a judge is someone who has spent a lot of time in the practice of law and has gained a lot of knowledge, and that you finish your career on the bench, that you then try and pass that knowledge along, and that you move the profession forward from where it was when you found it. And that resonated with me very much when I was in my 20s. And it stuck with me since. And now that I'm getting to that age, I think it's an important step.
If elected, what are some of the principles and values that will guide your approach to handling cases on the court?
The biggest thing to understand about a common pleas judge, a trial court judge, is that it's not a policy-making job. A common pleas judge's job is to apply the law that's decided by others, by our legislature or by judges in higher courts. So my guiding principle is always going to be judgment and fealty to the law. I've spent 33 years in the practice of law. I take it seriously. It's the only thing I've ever done. It's the only thing I ever really wanted to do. And I think that fealty to the law and fealty to the rules as established by others is very important.
Courts have increasingly relied on technology for remote hearings and case management. What role do you see technology and innovative practices playing in the common pleas court?
A huge role. One of the things that makes me unique in this race, and quite honestly in this county, is that the first 20 years of my practice, I did what's called catastrophic loss litigation, and I was based out of Cleveland. So I was national counsel for a couple of different manufacturers and a regional counsel for others. And what that means is that I've spent a lot of time in a lot of courtrooms throughout the country. There are, frankly, a lot of states and a lot of places that handle technology far better than we do here in Lorain County. Technology is a tool. Oftentimes people think it's a replacement, and it's not, but it can make things easier. I'm a big fan of an electronic docket and helping to move that forward in Lorain County. We've had some fits and starts over this last several years. I think that would do wonders to increase access to the court system for people. I think it also would make the handling of matters much more efficient. I think at times in our courthouse, we tend to move a little bit more slowly than we should, particularly on civil matters. And I think that technology can be leveraged really to help us move that more quickly.
As legal trends evolve, how do you plan to stay updated on the developments in the law that could affect you as a judge?
Let me say it this way. I've never met a good lawyer who wasn't a little bit neurotic and a little bit scared, because what makes you good is that you're afraid that you're not going to get the answer right, or you're afraid you're going to miss something. So good lawyers tend to work hard. I've never known somebody who wasn't a grinder. I've never known a good lawyer who didn't work harder than they needed to. And I've done that for 32 years. I don't anticipate that will change on the bench. And as a matter of fact, it'd probably get worse, because the judge was always there to tell you whether you're right or not. And once I assume the bench, I want to be that person. And I've had too many cases of consequence where you're dealing with life-changing events or company-changing events to not take it very seriously. And I think that's important.
Well, let's switch over and talk a little bit about you. What's your background?
I was born in Lorain, was raised in Lorain, went to Admiral King High School, I went to college on a scholarship to play football. I know you can't tell by looking at me now, but I used to be somewhat athletic. My father worked at Aztec Catalyst, was a technician there, and my mother was a private school teacher in Lorain in a variety of private schools for a while. Went to college, came out and went to law school at Cleveland Marshall. I edited the law review when I was there. Came out and started at Benish Friedlander, Copeland and Arnoff, which was a large law firm in Cleveland. I worked there for a little bit, got married to a woman from South Dakota, and we started a family shortly thereafter. I moved from Benish to a smaller firm, what's called a boutique firm. That's a firm that specializes in a particular type of work rather than a more general service firm. And we essentially specialized in handling large civil cases. And that led me to travel extensively across the United States. And as my kids grew, it became harder and harder to maintain a good family life and travel 100,000 miles a year. And my wife and I made a lifestyle decision, and I came out and got hired by Dennis Will to handle litigation filed either against or by the county about 12 years ago. And then when Jerry Ennis retired at the end of Dennis Will's last term, I took over the civil division for JD. I have 2 kids, a son, Dan, who's just finishing his PhD in Cornell, and a daughter, Marissa, who just started her PhD at University of Pennsylvania. So my wife, Jenny, is a public school teacher in Westlake, Ohio, and I got a dog and a cat.
In your professional career, what are you most proud of accomplishing?
It's been a long career, a lot longer than I thought it would be when I started, right? You don't think you're going to work as long when you work on a schedule from September to August or September to May every year. I was fortunate to work on a case for the city of Greene and a couple of other suburbs of Akron many years ago on a federal court case that was filed when it was the first reverse discrimination case brought in the United States. And when open enrollment came into Ohio, if you remember, the city of Akron decided that if you were African American, you could leave the school district of Akron and go to one of the surrounding school districts. But if you were in Greene or somewhere else and were African American, wanted to come in, you couldn't. And the local school districts found that to be wrong, and I agree with it. And I was part of the team that handled the defense of that case in front of Sam Bell, who was a great judge of ours out of federal court in Akron. And we ultimately won that and established a precedent and said you can't exclude people based on race or economic factors for open enrollment. And that was a very proud moment. A long time ago, but a very proud moment.
Outside of work, what are your hobbies and interests, and how do these help to recharge you?
There was a guy named John Martindale who was my first mentor when I worked, and he told me that I should develop a hobby that let me start something and finish something, because one of the things about the practice of law is you're never done. He said if you don't have something that you can do start to finish, it'll drive you crazy. And he's very right about that. So what do I like to do? I do a little bit of woodworking, mostly on a relatively small scale, boxes and small tables and things like that. And I also cook quite a lot. And you can't tell me we're only on audio, but you can see I certainly also like to sample the food that I cook. I do that. I'm an outdoorsman. I used to hunt a lot with my dad when he was still alive, but that's faded. Since my dad passed, it's not as much fun as it used to be. I run my dog when I can, and that's about it.
Last question. What else should voters know prior to voting in November?
I think I bring a very different perspective and experience base to this bench than what we see in Lorain County. I have a great deal of experience in commercial cases and in general trial work that is unusual for this area. Most of that comes from the fact that I spent years traveling across the country trying cases and appearing in courtrooms. I believe that I've tried cases in well over a dozen different states. I've appeared in well over half of the state courts in the country and an unknown number of federal courts. I think that gives me a really broad base of experience to take pieces and parts of things I've learned in California or Oregon or Mississippi and apply it to the circumstances that we face here today. I think the other thing is if you know me at all or if you follow the news at all, you'll know that I've been in positions where I've had to handle hard things and make hard decisions. And I've done that professionally and I've done in accordance with the law for a very long time. And I think that's important to know.
Finally, where can people go to learn more about your qualifications and connect with you?
Petticordforjudge.com is our website. You could go there. We're also on Facebook, which is unfortunate because I'm a little old for Facebook, but it's a tool now, and it's Petticord for Judge at Facebook.
Thanks, Dan, for joining us and sharing your insights.
I appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the LorainCounty.com Business Insights Podcast. We hope you found this conversation informative and that it provided some ideas that will help your business continue to grow. Please follow us on your favorite podcast platform to hear each episode where we shine a spotlight on local resources that will boost your business. And we want to hear from you. Email ed@loraincounty.com to share your feedback and topic ideas.